The marriage of Daemon and Rhaenyra in episode 7 of House of the Dragon was a big payoff for a lot of fans after so much teasing and build-up throughout the season. However, with Laenor Valerian's fate being changed in the show, this could create some interesting scenarios. If Laenor is still alive, and thus technically still married to Rhaenyra, would that make her marriage to Daemon illegal or illegitimate? In this video, we're going to take a look back at history to try and find the answer. I've turned down a lot of ads as the product didn't fit the channel, but this is not the case with Bloodlines Heroes of Lithos, a hero collector fantasy RPG with stunning 3D graphics. Build and defend your kingdom whilst collecting champions such as elves, demons, and orcs as part of a deep storyline. Lineage is at the centre of the world of Ice and Fire. In Bloodline, you create new legendary champions by marrying your existing champions, creating new hybrids. Now is the time to check out Bloodline, as it's just had a new update with its Christmas event starting December 22nd, adding in the hard-hitting damage dealers, the Lycan clan. For a limited time, you can get the champion Goltang for free and create some new hybrids. You can also enjoy battling in a new guild war, Valley of the Conquerors, on brand new maps with legendary hybrids as rewards. For the first season, you can unlock the rare demigod vampire hybrid champion Scarlet. Gather your guild and start playing now to get her for free by beating your foes. New bloodlines and legendary hybrids are constantly being added into the game, so who knows what interesting combinations you could come up with to suit your playstyle. Use my link or scan the QR code to download Bloodlines for free from the Android or iOS app stores. Doing so using my link gets you a special starter pack with 3 stamina potions, 100,000 gold and 100 diamonds. First off, let's talk about the legality of marriage in Westeros, as it is a little more complicated than it first appears. There are 2 common forms of marriage that seem to be widely accepted. A marriage under the faith of the Seven, and a marriage under the Old Gods, as seen mostly in the north. You also have marriage under the Drowned God, which allows marriage without one of the party consenting or actually being physically present. However, due to these marriages not being consummated and then being isolated to the Iron Islands, they are easy to get out of. With so many different types of marriage, from my research, the legality side of it seems to be confusing to some degree when trying to figure out who actually has authority and jurisdiction. For example, how does the faith view Old God marriages? Would they have the power to annul a marriage from a different religion and vice versa? There are lots of hypotheticals without clear answers, so we can only do what we can with the information we have. In terms of the faith of the Seven, you have the High Septon, who is the head of the religion. He does have the power to annul marriages, and I guess judge the legality of it in that regard. Whereas in the case of the Old Gods, it seems very much more relaxed and decentralized, and open to some degree. I guess if you want to annul your marriage with the Old Gods, in this case, you could just do it, as it's not really an organized religion. In terms of what constitutes a legal marriage, strictly speaking, as long as the marriage was witnessed and consummated, I think it's considered legally binding, regardless if it's with the faith or the Old Gods. The difference is, with the faith, there is a High Septon who can set aside the marriages. While the Old Gods are of course an important part of the culture of Westeros, the number of followers is limited to the north and a few isolated places such as Raventree. Thus, the number of Old God marriages seems quite small in comparison to those of the faith. Therefore, the focus for this discussion regarding Daemon and Rhaenyra is focused more around the faith of the Seven. As we saw in House of the Dragon, Rhaenyra and Laenor seem to have been married under the faith, thus their marriage is under their jurisdiction. What is vital to this conversation is, while thanks to Jaehaerys' Doctrine of Exceptionalism, incest is allowed for members of House Targaryen in the eyes of the faith, as they were seen as more than just normal mortal men, and closer to gods. What's important to remember here is the faith openly rebelled against House Targaryen during both the reigns of Aenys and Maegor, and even after the rebellions were put down, it would take a lot of negotiation and smoothing over during the reign of Jaehaerys to lay out a framework both the crown and the faith were happy to work with. But the point here is, the faith is genuinely a threat and has enough power to go against the crown, as seen throughout history. But even with Jaehaerys' work with the Doctrine of Exceptionalism, that leniency does not extend to polygamy. Polygamy was tolerated in the case of Aegon the Conqueror and his sisters. Well, because he was Aegon the Conqueror, and the fact that Aegon had willingly converted to the faith of the Seven before the conquest, which helped build up a lot of good faith with the Lords of Westeros. And I mean, the man had just turned half Westeros into ash. No one was really going to say no to him at this point. But when his son, Maegor, took a second wife, no Septon on Dragonstone was willing to perform the ceremony due to Maegor already being married. he managed to circumvent this issue by having a Valyrian wedding. Before House of the Dragon, we didn't really know much about Valyrian weddings and what they really entailed, just that Maegor had one. So in a way, House of the Dragon did fill in the blanks there. Regardless of the fact that the wedding was a Valyrian one, once the High Septon and the other lords of Westeros as a whole found out, they condemned the marriage as a sin. However, I can't find any sources that say it was denounced strictly as illegitimate, but I guess condemning it as a sin could kind of be seen as that. This all results in Maegor's exile across the Narrow Sea, when he chose not to set aside his second wife, to appease the faith. So what does this all add up to, and how does Laenor being alive matter in all of this? Okay, so we know the faith are relatively chill with incest, so Daemon and Rhaenyra are okay when it comes to that, but what is clear is they do not agree with polygamy, and this is a fundamentally big issue for them, as it's not just the faith who seem to have an issue with it, but the wider population north of Dawn, given the widespread condemnation of Maegor taking a second wife. Laenor being alive in the show creates a few potential issues for Daemon and Rhaenyra that do not exist in the books, with him being properly dead and not just fate dead as seen in the show. Namely, if Laenor is not dead, then by marrying Daemon, Rhaenyra is technically taking a second husband, which then raises many questions about the legitimacy of her marriage and the legitimacy of her children in the eyes of the faith as a result. Now, for all intents and purpose, Laenor is officially and technically dead in the show in the view of the wider population. His family think he is dead, along with the faith, other lords, everyone apart from Daemon and Rhaenyra themselves being the only two to know the truth, meaning Rhaenyra is then free to marry Daemon. It only becomes an issue if Laenor should put back up publicly in Season 2, and even if Laenor does come back in Season 2, I do suspect it will be covertly, with him still being somewhat hidden, thus not bringing Daemon and Rhaenyra's marriage into question. In fact, I made a whole video about this, I will link below, covering how they could bring Laenor back in Season 2 without breaking continuity and causing long-term story issues with the book too much. But I think the writers foresaw this issue with the polygamy by keeping Laenor alive, and in the event he does come back. While we know in the book, thanks to the Maegor situation, even though his second marriage used the technical loophole of being a Valyrian marriage, the faith and lords still condemned it, and it caused no end of issue, almost being the first domino to fall in the faith uprising. But thus far in the show continuity, none of that has yet been established in regards to the backstory of Maegor, the faith and Valyrian marriage. So they could have chosen a Valyrian wedding for Daemon and Rhaenyra as a technical loophole and get out clause to the polygamy issue should they choose to bring Laenor back in any public way. Or more simply, they could just ignore the issue altogether, like it doesn't matter. On a side note quickly, I do think the biggest factor in Daemon and Rhaenyra having a Valyrian wedding simply comes down to it really suiting their characters and their relationship, with it just making sense for them. Any notion of it being a loophole, in my view, would just be an added benefit. The way marriage and the legal side of it, with so many different forms of marriage, is quite vague and not wholly fleshed out, but on a surface level you can see how they fundamentally interact. Doing the research for this video, I found looking at how the different marriage customs work in both Westeros and across the Narrow Sea really interesting, especially trying to piece together how they all interact with each other. So it's an area that, with some more in-depth research and background reading of the main books, I hope to be making some videos on soon. But in conclusion, is Daemon and Rhaenyra's marriage illegitimate? Really, it depends on your interpretation of the source material, but I guess technically no, unless Laenor should come back very publicly. But again, there are so many different ways the show could handle this, and they've got several different loopholes they could use to justify the polygamy. But once again, what I love about this discussion is just how the impact of a character living in the show who died in the book can have on the long-term story.